Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
It was one of those evenings where everything looks perfect if you just glance at it, the kind of suburban performance that only families like mine can orchestrate, where the silverware shines, the napkins are folded into delicate little triangles, and the air smells like some Pinterest recipe my mother insists she invented, even though we all know she didn't. My niece, Emily, had just turned 16, and so we were all gathered in my parents' backyard for what they called a little something to celebrate the big milestone. There were balloons tied to the chairs, a tent rental, even a guy with a Bluetooth speaker pretending to be a DJ, though I swear he was my mother's friend Janice's son just pressing shuffle on an old playlist. Jenny, of course, was glowing like someone had handed her a crown. My little sister has always had that look, that sheen of effortlessness, like her life was the reward everyone else was waiting for. She moved through the crowd in a flowing, peach-colored dress, smiling like a politician and calling everyone sweetheart, as if she'd aged into some perfect fusion of homemaker and PDA queen. Her husband, Mark, was off in the corner chatting about property taxes like it was some fascinating new science, and her 3 kids were running around hopped up on cake and Coca-Cola, shrieking into the golden air of early evening. I sipped my wine slowly, not speaking unless spoken to, which, let's be honest, wasn't often. My family has a way of pretending I'm not there unless they need tech help or someone to fix the goddamn insurance paperwork, because no one else knows the difference between a deductible and a copay. I wore black. Not for the drama. For the silence. I didn't need to match the decor or the sentiment. I just needed to sit, to listen, and to wait, which I've always been good at. When dessert rolled around, my mother tapped her glass with the back of a spoon, the metal ping echoing across the tent like a warning shot. "We just want to say a few words," she began, smiling that strained, too perfect smile that always came right before she announced something that was going to piss me off. "We are so proud of you, Jenny," she continued, reaching over to squeeze her daughter's hand. "You're raising such amazing kids, and being a mother is the hardest job in the world, we all know that." There were nods. Small, smug nods around the table, like everyone had been prepped in advance. And because we believe in rewarding hard work, Dad jumped in, standing behind Mom like the towering old general he used to be. "We've decided to fully fund the college plans for all 3 of your kids. 100%. Books, housing, tuition, everything. It's already in a dedicated trust." For a moment, the air held still. Then came the clapping, Jenny's kids squealed. Mark muttered, "Wow," like someone had handed him a sports car, and Jenny covered her mouth in fake shock. The applause filled my ears like static. My stomach tightened. And still I smiled. No one looked at me. Not once. The conversation picked up again quickly, some laughter, a joke about how Lauren never wanted kids anyway, and how this makes sense. I think my cousin Alex even made a crack about how I must be relieved not to have any expenses, just my cat and my Airbnb business. He said it like I ran a lemonade stand. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope, plain white, no logo, sealed with a gentle crease. I set it on the table and nudged it, slow as molasses, across the linen cloth until it reached Dad's elbow. He glanced down, confused. Maybe he thought it was a late birthday card or some thank you note. He peeled it open, casually, still chewing. Then he read the first line. And something happened. His lips stopped moving. His fork hovered midair. The skin around his jaw pulled tight like a thread had been yanked. His eyes scanned the page once, twice, then snapped up to me like I'd slapped him across the face with it. The paper trembled in his fingers. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I let the silence crackle around us like dry leaves underfoot. Jenny leaned over. "What is it, Dad?" He didn't answer her. His voice dropped an octave lower than usual, lower than I'd heard in years, maybe decades. It was the voice he used when he caught me sneaking out at 16. It was the voice that ended arguments. Final. Unforgiving. What the hell is this, Lauren? You don't grow up thinking your parents will pick sides. Not really. Not when you're little and everything is still wide-eyed and hopeful and full of birthday balloons and bedtime stories. But eventually you notice the way the scales lean. Always just slightly. Always just enough to tilt the world in favor of someone else. I was 8 when Jenny got her own room, painted pink with white trim, and one of those canopy beds that made it look like she lived in a catalog. I had to wait until she left for college to move out of the room we'd shared, and even then, the carpet was stained, and the closet door never closed quite right. My dad said, "You don't need fancy things, Lauren. You're the practical one," like it was a compliment. Like it was something I should want. By the time I was in high school, it was obvious to anyone who bothered paying attention. Jenny got a car, not a great car, but still a car, for her 17th birthday. I asked for one too, just something used, something that didn't leak oil when it rained, and Mom gave me that look she always gave when she didn't want to say no directly but wanted me to feel ashamed for asking. "We've got to be careful right now," she said, patting my hand like I was a senior citizen. "Money's tighter than you think." Jenny's car was bought that same year. A green Toyota Corolla with a sunroof and new tires. I worked 2 jobs my junior and senior year. I saved every damn dime. When I applied for college, I got into a decent state school. Not Ivy League, not fancy, but good enough to matter. I asked if they'd help, and Dad said he could maybe chip in here and there, but I'd be better off applying for FAFSA and just taking out a loan like everyone else. Jenny, who had gone to the same school 3 years earlier, had her tuition covered, as long as she got decent grades. That was the rule, apparently. She barely scraped by, graduated with a 2.4 GPA and a smile, and they still paid for her grad school application fees after. I took out a loan. Not a huge one, just $30,000, which back then didn't feel like drowning until the interest kicked in. They never co-signed. They never even offered. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with the paperwork, pen in hand, and Mom walked by, glanced at it, and said, "You'll be stronger for it, sweetie. This builds character." I think that was the day I stopped looking at them the same way. Not with hate. Not even with anger. Just with distance. When Jenny got engaged, they threw her an engagement party in the backyard with fairy lights and catered food and one of those portable bars that cost, like, $600 just for the weekend rental. I asked if they needed help with anything, and Mom waved me off. "Oh, honey, we've got this covered. You just come and look pretty, okay?" I did. I wore a borrowed dress and pretended not to notice that Jenny's bridal bouquet was made of real orchids, flown in from God knows where. When I got married a few years later, we eloped. Courthouse. One witness. No orchids. Dad didn't even ask for a photo. Over time, you get smart. You stop asking questions you don't want to know the answers to. But I started keeping receipts. Not just the literal ones, though I had plenty of those, but the mental kind too. Every time they bought Jenny a new washer, I made a note. Every time they babysat her kids for free while I had to pay $60 for a sitter just to run errands, I logged it in the growing file in the back of my mind. Every favor. Every overlooked birthday. Every dinner where they made jokes about how I was the independent one, like that meant I didn't bleed like the rest of them. They gave Jenny $2,500 to help with the twins' first birthday. $2,500. That's like almost 10 grand. They rented a bounce house, a magician, hired a woman to dress up as Elsa and take photos with the toddlers who couldn't even say Elsa yet. I brought a gift card and cupcakes I made myself, and my mother whispered, "That's so thoughtful, sweetie," in a tone that meant the opposite. Last year, I found out about the will. It happened by accident. A cousin of mine, the one who drinks too much and talks even more, mentioned that Dad had finalized some estate paperwork now that the grandkids are older. I laughed, thinking it was some general prep for old age thing. But something about the way he said it stuck in my brain like a splinter. So I asked, casually. Then not so casually. Then again, more directly. Mom deflected. "It's all taken care of," she said, in that voice that meant, don't dig. But I'm good at digging. I went looking, found out through a friend of a friend, someone who used to work at the law office downtown, that the trust didn't include me, not just in a you get less kind of way. No, I wasn't in it at all. They'd written me out entirely. No mention, no clause, nothing. Jenny was named executor, her kids listed as beneficiaries. Even Mark's name showed up once, but mine didn't. I stared at the paper for 10 full minutes before laughing. A bitter kind of laugh, the kind you choke on. The kind that tastes like pennies and regret. I didn't cry. I just folded it up, tucked it into the same folder where I kept the tax records and old bills, and all the other receipts I'd been collecting for years. So when I slid that envelope across the table last week, when Dad opened it and lost the color in his face, it wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't revenge. It was just accounting. Pure, cold, long overdue arithmetic. And I hadn't even told them the worst of it yet. The thing about power is that most people don't realize when they've handed it over, especially the ones who've never had to second-guess their position at the top of the family food chain. My father, George, had been that kind of man his whole life, the type who expected obedience without question and took silence as agreement, especially from his daughters, and even more so from me. For decades, he wielded authority in that quiet, old-school way, the kind that doesn't come with shouting or threats, but with heavy looks and sentences that didn't allow for a second opinion. So when he opened the envelope and started reading, when his fingers tightened around the paper like it might vanish if he let go, I could see it, the first flicker of confusion breaking through the stone wall of certainty that had ruled his face since I was a child. Everyone at the table noticed the change, even if they didn't understand it yet. Jenny leaned forward with a furrowed brow, her hand still resting on the rim of her wine glass, probably assuming I'd pulled some petty stunt or tried to ruin another of her golden moments. My mother's smile twitched at the corners, just a hairline fracture in the mask she wore so well. But it was Dad's eyes that told the real story, scanning the page, then looking at me, then back down again as if somehow, between the legal jargon and the notary stamp, he might have misread what was clearly printed in black and white. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even dramatic. It was paperwork. Cold, dull, precise paperwork, the kind he used to breeze through without blinking back when he handled everything, back when he told us what was fair and what was final. What he held now was a legal summary of the shift he'd never noticed, the moment the pendulum swung in the other direction. Years ago, during his second hospital stay, the one where his blood pressure had spiked and they'd kept him overnight for observation, he'd asked me to help sort the bills, the mail, the monthly transfers that Mom always forgot. Just help your old man for a week or two, he'd said, handing me access without hesitation. I did more than help. I organized. I consolidated. I took the mess he'd left and turned it into something cleaner, sharper, airtight. And then I had him sign the document. Not in secret, not under duress, just casually, with a stack of other things he was skimming between reruns of his favorite cop show. He didn't ask questions. He never asked questions when it came to me handling things. "You're the responsible one, Lauren," he always said. "You're the one with her head screwed on straight." So he signed it. A limited but powerful transfer of financial control, granting me oversight of family assets for emergency management and estate planning. Legalese for, I can do whatever I need if you're not well enough to do it yourself. He'd forgotten. Or maybe he never really knew what he gave me. In the years that followed, I didn't use it like a hammer, not right away. I moved slowly, carefully, reorganized accounts, shifted ownership of one property into a family trust, paid off certain things early, made strategic choices, as I explained once in a meeting with their accountant when Dad couldn't make it. No one questioned me. Why would they? I had the paperwork. I had the answers. I didn't need to shout. But the thing is, the trust one built, the one I structured like a chessboard, piece by piece, move by move, wasn't built with Jenny in mind. It wasn't built for Mom, or even for the grandkids they were so determined to spoil like royalty while I paid my own way through every scraped and bruised year. No, that trust was built to hold power exactly until this moment, a moment where the imbalance could no longer be ignored, where their assumptions could finally crack under the weight of something heavier than guilt. Dad lowered the document. He stared at me like he'd never actually seen me before. Not the version I played for them, not the good daughter, the quiet one, the helper, but the woman who could cut through the legacy he thought was set in stone with a single piece of paper and a signature he gave me in sweatpants with a soda in his hand. "What the hell is this, Lauren?" he asked again, voice lower now, more gravel than question. But I didn't flinch. "It's the power of attorney you signed back in 2019, I said calmly, each word weighted like a brick on his chest. "You remember? After the hospital scare? You were worried about Mom handling things on her own, so you asked me to take over until you got better. I didn't give you," he was starting to stutter, to reach for the kind of outrage that had always worked before, but I cut him off. "You gave me access to everything," I said. "I managed the accounts, reorganized the structure, consolidated your assets. And then I moved the house into a protected family trust. One that I control." The silence was instant. It was thick. You could hear the rustling of a napkin or the shifting of someone's chair like it was an earthquake. Jenny's face had gone from smug to something pale and twisted, like she'd just realized her hand of cards was empty. "You gave me power over the estate, Dad," I said, finally leaning back in my chair with a calmness that surprised even me. "You don't even own the house anymore. There are certain things families bury so deep that they forget where they put them, assuming that silence and time will rot them down into dust. But the truth doesn't decompose, it waits, and it festers, and when it comes back, it smells worse than it ever did the day it was born." My father thought he had buried it, that he'd traded one sin for silence and come out clean on the other side, but I was there, and I remember every word, every deal made behind a closed door. Every time someone thought I would be the one to take the hit quietly just to keep the family from looking messy. They all thought I was the cleaner, the fixer, the daughter who made the problems disappear, but even the best cleaners keep a record, and I never stopped keeping mine. My mother, Barbara, had not always been the paragon of loyalty and Sunday dresses that she now pretended to be. Years ago, back when I was still married to Alan, before the name made my stomach twist like a knife, she had a secret that could have split the entire family in half, and for a time it nearly did. There was a man, not my father, not a passing flirtation, but someone she saw more than once, someone she confessed about only when she thought Dad might find out on his own. I was the one she told first. She cried in my kitchen for nearly an hour, begging me not to say anything, saying she didn't know how it had happened, that she just felt lonely, that after 40 years of marriage, she didn't feel seen anymore. I was horrified not because she'd cheated, not because she lied, but because I knew what this meant. If my father found out, really found out, there would be a war, and I would be drafted as the soldier expected to protect both their reputations. She asked me to help her make it go away. I didn't want to, but I did, because I'm the one who handles things. I found out who the man was. I tracked down the texts, the emails, even made sure the vacation photos never surfaced online where one of our judgmental cousins might stumble onto them during a wine-fueled Facebook scroll. When Dad finally learned something was off, probably from some friend of a friend who saw her getting into someone else's car, I was the one who stepped in. I told him it was done, handled, over. I made sure he never saw the worst of it, and in return, I made him a deal. I said, "You don't cut me out of your life when I divorce Alan. You don't take her side, you don't turn your back, and you sure as hell don't pretend like it's all my fault." He agreed. Begrudgingly, but he agreed. It wasn't written down, not like the document he signed years later, but it was a pact, and he knew damn well he owed me. But what none of them seemed to understand, what they never quite grasped in all their backyard celebrations and wine-soaked speeches about family, was that I don't forget. And I sure as hell don't forgive. When Alan and I split, it wasn't sudden. It was a slow, grinding unraveling of something that had been freeing since year 3. He stopped being kind. He started drinking more than usual. He lied about little things at first, receipts, overtime hours, and then it turned into bigger things. There were women, and I knew it. He didn't even bother hiding it well. But the worst part, the thing that still burns, wasn't the betrayal in our marriage, it was what happened after. Jenny, my sister, the one who always found a way to twist things so she looked like the supportive one, kept talking to him. I didn't find out until months later, when a friend mentioned in passing that she'd seen him at Jenny's house during Thanksgiving. That year I had been told not to come, that it would be too tense, that maybe next year we could all be together again. And there he was, smiling in photos with her kids, sitting at the table where I'd carved turkeys since I was 20. She'd let him into the house, my sister, the golden child, let him sit beside our parents and laugh like he hadn't broken me in half, and left without looking back. That wasn't just a betrayal. That was a declaration. That was her choosing him over me again. So yes, I took him off the deed. Alan and I had bought a small property years ago, just outside town, the kind of place we thought would be our weekend getaway, maybe a spot to retire one day. After the divorce, he thought he'd still be entitled to it because the paperwork was vague and he always believed he could outnegotiate me if it came down to it. But I had prepared. I had rewritten the agreement. I had moved the ownership into a separate holding, a shell LLC in my name alone, cleaned of his fingerprints and bolted shut. It took some maneuvering and a few calls I didn't like making, but I got it done. And now, as I stood in front of my entire family, watching the horror climb their faces like slow poison, I let the truth settle in. By the way, I said, voice steady, clear, not a tremor in it, Alan's name is off the deed. That cabin he thought he still had a claim on? It's mine now. Fully. I made sure both of you lost something. Jenny blinked like she'd been slapped, hard, like the room was spinning under her feet. My father opened his mouth, closed it again, and looked at my mother like maybe she'd have the right words to fix this. But she didn't. Not this time. Not anymore. I didn't slam the door when I left the table, didn't storm out or throw my wine glass against the ground the way people do in movies when the climax hits and they want the audience to feel the catharsis shake the screen. I just stood up, quietly, smoothed the hem of my dress with hands that felt colder than they should have, and walked down the gravel path toward the back gate, past the carefully trimmed hydrangeas my mother paid the gardener to spray with growth hormone every spring. I didn't look back, not even when I heard the chairs scrape against the patio stones, not even when the voices rose into a scatter of disbelief and panicked whispers, and the sharp command of my father trying to restore some sense of order to the table he no longer controlled. I made it to the driveway before I heard her behind me, her heels catching on the bricks as she half ran, half stumbled to close the space between us. Lauren, my mother called, voice brittle and rising in pitch the way it always did when she was more afraid of losing face than actually losing her daughter. Lauren, please. Wait. You can't just... And then she reached me, caught my sleeve with shaking fingers that still had that faint smell of lemon cake and wine and whatever cheap perfume she insisted on buying because it smelled like her 20s. I turned slowly, met her eyes, and for the first time in what felt like decades, I didn't see a mother standing in front of me. I saw a woman who had made choices, who had played favorites, who had spun narratives and smiled through teeth, so practiced in politeness she forgot they were capable of causing pain. She was crying real tears this time, not the kind she pulled out when the neighbors were watching or when she needed Dad to feel guilty enough to fix something. You can't do this, she said, voice cracking under the weight of desperation. You can't take everything away. I didn't answer right away. I watched the mascara pool beneath her eyes, streaking the corners like a watercolor painting left out in the rain, and part of me wanted to reach out, to soften, to say something comforting just because that's what I'd been trained to do for so long. But I didn't. I kept my hands at my sides and my voice steady. You already took everything from me, I said, slower than necessary, making sure she heard every word. You just didn't think I'd notice. She opened her mouth, probably to deny it, to claim ignorance or confusion, or that twisted logic she used when she needed to make me the villain for wanting anything at all. But before she could speak, Dad's voice boomed from the porch like a gunshot across the garden. "You don't have the right," he said, his words echoing across the roses and lawn chairs like some final judgment from a man who'd long since lost the gavel. "You give that house back. It belongs to this family." I laughed then, not loud, not cruel, just a short, exhausted sound that tasted like old wounds and new scars. "I am this family," I said, not yelling, just tired of pretending I wasn't. "I'm the one who made sure you didn't lose it when the market tanked. I'm the one who kept the taxes paid, who cleaned up the messes you ignored. You gave me power because you thought I wouldn't use it. That was your mistake." Behind him, I saw Jenny's kids standing in the doorway, wide-eyed and confused, the way children always are when the masks adults wear begin to slip and slide and fall apart in front of them. They didn't know what was happening, not really, but they knew something sacred had cracked open, something that might not be put back together the same way again. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway, out of instinct, out of curiosity, maybe just out of the need to hear someone else's voice after so many years of pretending mine didn't matter. There was silence on the line at first, a breath, then a familiar tone that sent a jolt straight through the center of my chest. "You finally used it, huh?" Alan said, calm and amused, like we were old co-conspirators sharing a secret joke in a room no one else could see. I hadn't heard from him in over a year, maybe more. Not since I told him to go to hell and meant it. And yet here he was, like a shadow that knew exactly when to fall across the doorframe. I leaned against the car, the keys still cold in my hand, and stared up at the fading sunset. "Just the start," I said quietly, not to him, not really, but to myself. He chuckled, but I hung up before he could say anything else. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need anyone's anymore. The thing about revenge is that people think it tastes sweet, that it fills the void and levels the field and makes the years of resentment melt into some kind of satisfaction. But it doesn't. It leaves a hollowness you don't expect, a silence even louder than the chaos you created. Standing there in the fading light, I felt something I hadn't prepared for, not guilt, not doubt, but an ache I couldn't name. Like I'd cut out a tumor only to find it had taken part of my soul with it. I knew they'd never forgive me, not really. I knew Jenny would twist the story, that Mom would cry to her book club, that Dad would rewrite the facts in his head until he became the martyr of his own downfall. I knew the grandkids would grow up thinking I'd stolen something from them. And maybe I had. But I also knew this, the truth has a weight, and carrying it alone all these years nearly broke me. Now they know the truth. But I still haven't told them everything.